I've just finished recording an entire course all about how to get started in property and the property fundamentals that you need to be aware of when you get started or before you get started in property. Now, if you're interested in getting registered for that, you can get access to it completely for free through the link in the description. But what I'm about to show you in this next kind of bit, for the next few minutes, is just a clip where I talk a little bit about due diligence and how to go about doing your due diligence on your property purchases. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it helpful. And remember, if you're interested in getting access to this for free, the link's in the description. We're going to limit the numbers of people who can access it. So if you're interested, get logged on, get your space secured as quickly as possible. This is going to get launched in January, so don't miss out. So we've worked out where you can start finding property deals, and we've also worked out the return on investment and the yield that you need to, the calculations that you need in order to work out whether a property deal is a profitable one. But as part of that, you also need to work out how you do your due diligence. Are you buying a good property investment? And this is what the process of due diligence is actually trying to tell us. Are we making a wise investment with our money? So the things that you need to be looking out for are split into two columns: the value that you're getting and the return that you're getting, and the value of the property, and also the costs involved in that particular deal. So to start with, you want to be looking at, when you're doing due diligence, you find a property, you want to work out what the property prices are when you're looking at like for like properties. Okay, so you want to keep this as close as possible. You might be looking at properties. A lot of people will jump into it and look at properties within half a mile radius of that area. Let's say you find something on Rightmove, you go to property sold prices, you look within half a mile radius. Now, that isn't always the best way to go about it, because that's too broad of a radius. I personally like to look at, if it's possible, recent like-for-like properties on the same street. That will give you a very clear indication of where the market is at and what you can expect to get for your property and what you can expect the value of your property to be. If there is nothing on your street, then I am willing to go a quarter mile radius out. But again, it has to be a like-for-like property. If you have a 3-bedroom terraced house that you're buying for £100,000 and you're comparing it to a 4-bedroom semi-detached house that sold for 180, it's not like for like. You can't compare. You can't work out, based on that one selling for 180, mine will be worth X. You can't work that out. And so you've got to look for like properties. If you're buying a 2-bedroom terraced, then you need to look for 2-bedroom terraced houses. I also like to look at what is the value of the property once it is done to a really good standard. So let's say we're buying a house that's run down. How much is that house worth? In my opinion, that's a subjective question. If you were to buy a house on a street, let's say every single house on that street is a 3-bedroom terraced house, and they're all done up to a good standard, and they're all selling for about £200,000. But your house is run down, it needs renovating. Let's say it needs £25,000 spending on it. So it's going to be worth 200,000. It needs 25,000 pounds spending on it. Does that make your house that you're buying worth 175? I don't know. You might think so. Personally, I don't. I think if you're going to buy something with risk, you're going to spend money renovating it, you should be able to make a profit on that. And so that property isn't worth as much as just the end value take off the renovation works. So what something is worth is quite subjective. What isn't subjective is a house that is done to a really good standard. That is what really we can expect the ceiling to be of the value of our property. So if I was buying a house that needed renovating, I start with the end in mind. If it's going to be worth £200,000 and we need £25,000 spending on it, and I want to make £25,000 profit, and I also want to factor in £5,000 to £10,000 worth of fees, I'm going to be picking that up for about £140,000. That's what that house is worth to me. So those are the sorts of things you need to be looking at, and the best way to be able to work out what you can pay for a property is what like-for-like properties are going for in the area, or like-for-like properties that are done to a really good standard. Now, one of the things you can also do is look at the price per square meter. Let's say you have 2 3-bed terraced houses next to each other, but one of them has been extended out the back and you're buying the one that hasn't been extended. You can go to the EPC register and find out what that house next door, how big that is. So it might be that that house there is 120 square meters and the property you're buying is 100 square meters, right? And if this house here sold for £240,000 and was 120 square meters, then that means that per square meter, the property is worth £2,000. So that means if you're buying one for 100 square meters, you times that by the value per square meter. So your £2,000 per square meter times by the 100 square meters that it is, your house should be worth about £200,000. I know that's quite wordy, and if that's confusing, just rewind a minute and rewatch what I've just said. But it's a really valuable way to work out what your property is worth. If there are different properties in the street that are like for like but a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, a lot of property lenders and valuers will look at this as well, work out what the price is per square meter when it comes to a refinance, for example. So it's definitely worth working out what your price per square meter is. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a nice little gauge to add to your due diligence process. The next thing you want to be looking at in your value and returns is your like-for-like rental income. Now, your rental income is based on how you're looking to rent it out, because you might be looking to rent it out as a single let, but it might also be that you want to rent it out as a HMO. So what are you going to rent it out as? How are you going to rent it out? Because you can't say, right, I've got a double bedroom that I'm going to rent out as part of a HMO, and look at an apartment and say, well, they're the same. They're not. You want to look for like. You want to look for other HMOs in the area. Platforms you can use for HMO rental comparisons are things like Open Rent and Spare Room. They're fantastic for HMOs. If you're looking for just a single let, Open Rent and Rightmove, what is for rent within a quarter-mile radius that are as like for like as you can possibly get. Those are great ways to work out what you can expect your rental returns to be. Now, if you're going to do something like serviced accommodation, you can use platforms like AirDNA. I'm not an Airbnb or serviced accommodation expert, so please don't take my word for this. If you want to deep dive into serviced accommodation, you're best going elsewhere and really getting to grips with that. That's not the strategy that I focus on. But I do know lots of people that use Airbnb, AirDNA as ways of doing their due diligence on not only what you can charge per night, but what you can expect to get as an occupancy rate. So those are a few different ways and platforms in which you can find out what your rental income is going to be. The other value and return section that you need to be really thinking about when it comes to your investment is the capital appreciation in the area. Now, if your house is worth, if you know you're going to get a 5% increase based on previous data, you know you can get a capital growth of about 5% per year. You can also factor that into your return on investment, because yes, you're not getting it cash in your pocket, but it is equity and value in the property that you can forecast over the next 5 to 10 years. So it does add value and it is a return, even though it might not be cash in your pocket. How do you work out what your, or at least estimate what the capital growth is going to be? You can use a platform, a section on Rightmove, and find out what the housing trends and the market prices are doing on that platform. So that's a really good way for you to work out what has been the increase in capital growth over the past couple of years, and therefore what do we think it's going to be over the next couple of years. And it's not going to be 100%, but it'll be able to give you a good figure and a good kind of estimate to work off of. Now, when it comes to costs, the things that you need to be thinking about, we kind of covered all of them. And, you know, we spoke about this in the calculation section, the kind of costs that you need to be aware of. But an additional cost that you need to be thinking about are renovation costs, okay? And I'm not going to jump into renovations right now. It's a very complicated topic, and I could create a whole new module all around that. But I'm going to be releasing just a quick, rough renovation estimator calculator very, very soon. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We're going to release that as like a spreadsheet that you can download, and you can plug and play your own requirements for each renovation that you're doing, just so that it spits out a rough guide for what it is that you are going to be needing to spend on your refurb. So just keep your eyes peeled. That is coming very, very soon. The other costs that you need to be aware of, we did cover this in another module, so I'm just going to fly through them. But it is your deposit, your legal fees, your stamp duty, your broker fees, your sourcing fees, your management costs, your maintenance costs, and your void periods. So there's lots of different costs involved, but if you can factor all of those in and factor in what your value and your returns are going to be, then you'll be in a really good position to work out and do some really strong due diligence. Once you've done your due diligence and everything that you can do behind a computer and behind the scenes, crunching some numbers, the next best thing you can do is call the agents, okay? And when you speak to an agent, here are some of the things that I think are really important for you to know. And so if you want to write these down or screenshot them, when you're speaking to an agent, you want to work out certain answers to certain questions. These are the questions that I ask when I'm speaking to an agent about property. The first one is this property still available? The amount of times that I speak to an agent anyway and just say, is this available? And they say, oh no, it sold last month. Well, why is it on the market? And you can have this pointless back and forth, but the reality is it's not available. So starting with that is always helpful to just cut people off. And if it's not available, you can just move on, rather than spending ages doing due diligence. If it's not even available, there's no point wasting your time. Now, when you are speaking to agents, a side note to this is it's really important that you control the conversation. A lot of people are afraid of speaking to agents on the phone, but the reality is an estate agent often doesn't actually know a whole lot about property. They are not experts in this field. In the UK, to be an estate agent, you have to be able to read and write pretty much. That's about it. You know, like in other countries, Australia, America, you have to be really qualified. Like being an agent is a really well respected and very high paid job. In the UK, you get paid about £12,000 a year plus about 30 quid for every house that you sell. It's the barrier to entry to be an estate agent is not high, and therefore you get people who are not experts, who do not know what they're talking about. So do not worry. You can control the conversation, and the way that you do that is by asking the questions. The thing I always say is the person who asks the questions is the person controlling the conversation. So start strong and just ask these questions, get them going. The other thing is a lot of people are told when they're agents to just get a viewing booked in. So what might happen a lot of the time is if you call up and you start asking questions, the first thing they'll say is, oh, you're interested in this property? Great. Would you like me to book you in for a viewing? And rather than just saying yes and just nodding along and say, yeah, that's fine, not a problem, don't let them control the conversation. It's fine. Just say, yeah, maybe. I'd just like to ask a few questions first, if that's okay. And then you move on from there. You start asking these questions. Firstly, is the property available? Secondly, how long has it been on the market? Okay, there's a really good tool that I use actually, and it's a good way of working out whether an agent is actually just lying, because on Rightmove you can see when a property was added, or if it's been reduced recently, you'll be able to see that. Now, there's a tool called Property Log. It's like a Google Chrome extension that you can download. I'm pretty sure it's free, or if it's not, it's like £1 or £2 a month, something like that. But if you pay for that, you will be able to see on every Rightmove listing anytime there's been a price change and what it's been. So you could go onto Rightmove, see a listing and see that it's been reduced in price every month for the last 6 months. So when you're asking these questions, you actually can ask them knowing the answer, but it's just a good gauge to see where the agent's at and putting the feelers out there and just building up a bit of rapport, and also working out what is the situation, because why is the price being reduced so often? Why has it been reduced so much? Why is there no interest in it? And it's just a way of you conducting a bit more due diligence about the property. So how long has it been on the market? The next question is the property tenanted, owner occupied, or vacant? Now, if it is tenanted, you want to be asking, how much do the tenants pay every month? You want to be asking, how long have they been there? And you also want to ask if they have ever been in any sort of rent arrears. Now, they might not own up to this straight away. This might be something that you find out in the legal process. But if somebody has a tenanted property that has been in rent arrears, they may just want to flog it. But if they do, and they are in rent arrears, then that is a great opportunity to not just bin off the deal, but to get an even heavier discount on that property. So that's definitely some questions that you need to be asking when it comes to tenanted properties. The other question is it a freehold or a leasehold property? A freehold is when you own the land that it's on and the property itself. A leasehold is when you own the property and you're renting the land itself. Usually on a house, this is like 999 years. But it's still very much worth knowing. If it is leasehold, the things you need to be aware of and be asking about is how many years are left on the lease. You also need to know how much is the service charge and the ground rent. These are monthly payments or annual payments to pay for not only basically renting the land, but also the upkeep of the land. Often service charges don't apply to houses. They only really apply to apartments where there's communal space and things like that. But it's still worth asking the question, as it's a way of controlling the conversation as well. The next question is, why are the vendors selling? You may have to sandwich this question in a little bit of a positive spin, because a lot of agents don't like to say why. But what is really key when you're doing your due diligence is working out what is the motivation of the seller. Are they motivated or not? Now, you can't just go out and say that to the agent. And so I often sandwich this question in a bit of a compliment as well. So as an example, let's say the property's tenanted, it's never been in rent arrears. I would say to the agent, oh, fantastic. So it's a cash flowing property. It's giving them money every month. So why is it that they want to sell? Is there a problem? And I would say it like that, where you're kind of giving a bit of a compliment and then asking the question out of a bit of concern, and they will then answer that question to try and settle your nerves, okay? They won't even question, oh, they're trying to find out the motivation. But it's just a way of sandwiching that question. Or it might even be that the property's empty, it's in really good condition, and you just say to them, okay, the property looks like a fantastic property, amazing area, and it looks in great condition. Why is it that they want to sell? And it's in the tone of voice that you use that almost puts the agent on the back foot, and it's like, oh no, they just, there's this, or you know, there's been a death in the family, or there's a divorce, or they're just relocating, or whatever it is. They will tell you what it is, but they will not tell you what the motivation is. If you say, and what's the motivation of the seller? They will just cut the conversation there and then. So you need to make sure you sandwich that question in a little bit of a strategic way. And then the last question is, would they be open to any offers below the current asking price? Often they'll say no, but even if they say yes, you know that they definitely will. If they say no, then you could just be, for me, I don't really pay any attention to that. I just ask the question in case they're willing to divulge. Do you know what? They'd be willing to take a significant reduction on this because we need to get it sold. If they come out with that, fantastic. If they say no, they're not interested in any offers, I kind of take that with a pinch of salt, because an estate agent's job is to get as much money as possible. So they're not going to just out the seller like that in most cases. But if they do, great, I'll take it. I want that information. So the last bit that I want to touch on in this module, and it's an exercise that I've done in many of my training events that I run. As I said, a lot of people get nervous about picking up the phone to estate agents. They think that estate agents are really knowledgeable, that if you've not got much experience in property, that they're going to catch you out and say, you know, you're a fraud, you are not a property investor, or whatever the concerns are. People are nervous to just pick up the phone. So one of the exercises that I'd encourage you to do, and I'd encourage you to do it right now once you finish this module, it's what I call the call without care exercise. And what I want you to do is go onto Rightmove, pick a city that you know for a fact you will never invest in, that you're not interested in investing in at all. I want you to search for a property in that area. I want you to find a property that you know you're not going to buy, just an average property in an average area, an average price. And I want you to call up the agent, and I want you to ask them 3 questions, okay? And then once you've asked those 3 questions, I want you to hang up. Now, the reason why I get people to do this and why I'd encourage you to do it is because it builds up that confidence of speaking to agents, picking up the phone, controlling the conversation, putting these things in practice without risking ruining a relationship with an agent in your local area. It kind of takes the pressure off and gives you a bit of a warm up before you start calling agents in your local area. If calling agents is something that you're nervous about, that you want to learn to practice, then I'd really recommend giving this a go. It's a really, really good way to just build up that confidence. And what the 3 questions are, It really doesn't matter. I don't care. It's just about learning to control that conversation. You might want to say, is the property leasehold or freehold? Is it tenanted? Is it in, how would you describe the condition, and blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. What matters is you're picking up the phone, you're speaking to agents, you're controlling the conversation, and then you're saying, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm going to speak to my business partner and I'll give you a call right back. And just hang up the phone. Job done. It builds up that resilience, it builds up your experience, and kind of just takes the pressure away from when you actually do the business trying to secure a deal in an area that you actually want to invest in.